Welcome to Washington Watch with Congressman Walter Jones. Each month, we take a look at the events happening in Washington, D.C. and how they affect our lives here in eastern North Carolina.
Beautiful little horse. It is God's gift to the world. So thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Thank you for...
And now, here's your Congressman, Walter Jones.
Welcome to the April edition of Washington Watch. I think today one of these programs that we've had so many programs that this will be one of those that you will find most interesting. I have for many years talked about our veterans in eastern North Carolina and what we need to do in Washington to make sure that we do not forget the veterans of America who have done so much for our country. And today is a special guest, and that is because he's been a friend of mine for many years. He is the Legislative Program Director for the Fleet Reserve Association. And I'm going to ask John Davis, for those of you that maybe are not military or don't have a loved one that's in the military, to tell you a little bit about the Fleet Reserve Association. Then we're going to get into the future, if I can say that, of active duty and retirees. And this man certainly is well versed as to what we're going to be doing. But let me first, John, welcome to this Washington Watch, and also let those people who are watching that are not in the military or have not been in the military maybe about Fleet Reserve Association, because y'all have a wonderful reputation here in Washington.
Thanks. Yeah, the Fleet Reserve Association's been around for a long time. We just celebrated our 90th anniversary. We got started in 1924. And what happened in the 1920 was Congress wanted to cut the budget and wanted to do it by cutting pay and cutting other benefits. And so a lot of sailors from the Philadelphia shipyard came down and walked the halls of Congress. And in fact, Congress let them testify in front of some of the committees to explain that they didn't want to have their pay cut and they didn't want to have end strength reduced and these things and benefits slashed. And they carried the day, but they all got together afterwards and they said, we need to have somebody down here keeping an eye on things. So they created the Fleet Reserve Association in 1924. So we're one of the older military veterans service organizations around in Washington, D.C. And we've been very involved with also the Military Coalition, which has about 35 other lobbying groups, such as the Veterans of Foreign Wars and some other groups. And we served some leadership roles in that. I was elected co-chairman of the coalition back in 2013. So we're very involved with that as well.
Well, John, I know you served in the Marine Corps and also served time in the Army Reserves, so you have that experience yourself because you've been in both services. And John, the reason I thought this would be a great program for all the citizens of eastern North Carolina, the 3rd District, but having Camp Lejeune Marine Base, or Camp Lejeune, and also Cherry Point Marine Air Station, and a lot of retirees. We're somewhere close to 70,000 retirees in the 3rd District of North Carolina, and that's veterans as well as those who are classified as retirees. The reason I wanted you to be on this show is that this year we're holding hearings on the subcommittees on a commission report. The commission was authorized by the Congress to come forward to the Congress with recommendations of how we can protect and preserve our retired benefits for active duty military as well as retirees. And also, we know that this country is in financial trouble. We talked about that in the elevator coming to this show today. We're $18.1 trillion in debt, and that debt clock is going up by the second. So therefore, we in Congress and both parties want to work with the different associations like Fleet Reserve Association and the other VSOs to make sure that we get the best package possible for those who are serving today, but those who are also retired. And this commission went all around this nation listening to veterans groups, both active duty and retirees, and they now are coming to Congress. Now, we have not put a bill in, and there will not be a bill introduced until 2016. But the reason we need to have this debate and discussion now as to what will be acceptable and what will not be acceptable. And I actually have the statement that was presented on February the 4th by Mr. Thomas Snee, the statement of the Fleet Reserve Association on the recommendations of the Military Compensation and Retirement Modernization Committee, submitted to the House Armed Services Committee, which I serve on. And again, John Davis, who's here today, is their Legislative Programs Director. So John, if you'll give your analysis and then we can get into questions
Sure.
that would be of interest to the people.
I want to say too, Mr. Snee has been with the Fleet Reserve Association as the director for 2 years, and he proudly served in the Navy for 31 years. I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and I've enjoyed working with him. The commission report had a lot of disturbing factors, results anyways, in it, and we were very concerned about that. We did have a lot of input, though. I must say that they allowed us at least half a dozen times to go over and meet and talk with them, and we had input. I don't know how much good it did, but we did have the opportunity to talk to them. But in many ways, this commission report is very much what I would call an anti-military retirement report, because it really in many ways goes against the interests of retirees. And we think retirees, especially when it comes to their benefits, they've earned those benefits.
Absolutely.
It's not like a welfare program. These people have earned that benefit through 20 or more years of arduous military service, and we think that needs to be understood. The first one was the first recommendation is probably the most troubling in that it makes major changes to the retirement system. It creates a blended program, if you will, of the current program, as you know, is 20 years, and then you get 50% of salary. The new program they're providing would be 20 years, you get 40%, but you'd also get a TSP, or a thrift savings plan, which is very similar to a 401k, and the government would match your contribution with that. The one thing bad, though, about a TSP is, or a thrift savings plans, is it doesn't mature till age 59 and a half. So yeah, the service member could take it with him after 6 years, but he's not going to collect a penny until age 59 and a half, so I don't know how much good that does to him. Also, it provided for a bonus at the 12-year mark of anybody's service if they agree to serve for 4 more years. And they've got programs like that now already, but this would be, we weren't clear whether other bonus programs would be eliminated in this one, to create this one. But the thing that really disturbed us most is we got an actuary, or actually the Military Officers Association had an actuary look at it, and your typical E7, so a gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps, serves 20 years and lives till age 85, would actually end up losing about $260,000 over the time of his retirement. So it's a cut to those that serve 20 or more years, and they're taking that money and they're giving it to people that serve 6 years, 5 years, whatever. We think that the people that serve 20 years should be that's an earned benefit, and that should not be cut.
I agree with you totally. Again, the reason that I wanted you on this show is that we in our office, and I have Jason Lowry, who does all my military issues in Greenville, North Carolina, and Ray Celeste here in Washington. And as this discussion is ongoing, and will be until 2016, and then the legislative process will take hold. John, I think that we all know that the different issues that are facing our country. I mentioned in the introduction of you that our nation is $18.1 trillion in debt. And yet, your comment, that's one I've said many, many times, those who have given so much to this country, as you said, it is an earned benefit. Right. And an earned benefit should not be threatened under any circumstances for those who have worn the uniform for this country. And my thinking is, looking at some of the issues that my staff has brought to my attention, and I think you and others have said, if this package, which it's not going to be, and I want to make this clear to those watching this show, what has been proposed is a blueprint of ideas of what need to be debated and discuss, it does not mean that all or any of this will become law, but it's going to be debated, that we know for sure. How do you see some of these recommended changes impacting on the all voluntary service?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because we think that one of the things about, for example, the first recommendation to give benefits, retirement benefits to people that serve, far less than 20 years, 6 years, whatever, 4 years, that you're basically incentivizing them to leave. And we think that's the wrong way to go. We're not opposed, though, let me just be clear, we're not opposed to giving some kind of benefit to people that, with less than 20 years. But we definitely would oppose this report or any program that took money from those who served 20 years to give it to those who served 6 years or less. Because we think it's important that the 20-year program it really keeps a strong career-minded force in place, and that's what's critical. NCOs in the military are the backbone of the military, and their expertise and their longevity, their experience play a vital role in keeping our military a very professional force.
John, I believe that I'm safe in saying that the Congress is very sensitive and very appreciative to those who have worn the uniform for our country and who are wearing the uniform in the present tense, and those in the future, that we realize that there is a need to make some significant changes. Now, can you give, maybe you already have, but if you don't mind repeating, a couple of ideas that from this commission's report that you would, or just pick one that you think would be extremely important if the idea of the Fleet Reserve Association and these other associations, I'm sure y'all have had many conversations,
yes.
One or two ideas that you think need to be encompassed in the debate that's going to take
Sure.
place down the road.
Well, the 8th out of 15, the 8th recommendation is for DOD and the Department of Veterans Affairs to work to collaborate together, and we've for a long time been in a favor of that. That's basically a seamless transition for a disabled service member to go to the VA, and they had we thought some very good ideas about that. One of the things, though, that's really important, and the VA, by the way, is moving in that direction, is to have an electronic health record, an electronic record that can also be shared by DOD and VA. And we don't have them sharing technology at this point, but they're getting better. But the big thing, though, is that claims, 95% of the recent claims are now actually filed electronically, which I guess in this day and age doesn't sound like much, but 4 or 5 years ago, all the claims at the VA were actually filed on paper. And so when someone moved from, say, North Carolina to Chicago, they had to have their claim file, this huge piece of paper, sent along with them to this Chicago office to be dealt with. And they couldn't do anything until they got the paper.
Right.
As opposed to now, if it's electronic, they can just, in Chicago, get on the computer and find the file electronically and print it out. So that's a huge step forward, and that's been going on for the last year or two. And like I said, almost all the claims now are electronic, which is a huge improvement. But they've still got a lot of work to do, as we know from the Phoenix scandal and whatnot. But we think it's critical that DOD and the VA be able to work together and do it in a very efficient manner. And there's a whole host of things that cause problems, from even such things as the drug formulary, where the VA has a very limited drug formulary, and you can have someone in the Department of Defense, a service member who has PTSD, they get the right mix of cocktail of drugs that help take care of his post-traumatic stress. He goes over to the VA, and those drugs are not on the formulary. They're not on the list that the VA can use, so they have to start over from scratch, which is not a very efficient way to deal with that kind of illness.
Well, John, I appreciate you bringing that issue up because, as you know, I'm going a little bit off subject now, but I've been a strong proponent of the doctors in our military hospitals having the authority to prescribe hyperbaric oxygen treatments should the doctor, along with the patient and the patient's family, determine that they would like for the soldier, Marine, Airman, Navy, whatever, who has PTSD or TBI as a treatment, and this has been a long battle. I'm not trying to get you involved in that.
No, we support that, though. We support your bill.
Well, I appreciate that, because I of the firm belief that there's too much medicating of our service personnel who have been wounded with PTSD or TBI, and I'm sure sometimes that's what they need, but you're not always sure that that's going to have the same impact. So thank you for saying that you do support what we're trying to do. And to get back on this issue again, the commission itself, when they testified before the Congress a few months ago, I really felt that they are grappling with a very complex and a very difficult issue, and that they want to do what is right. And I think you have acknowledged that. The problem is that of trying to come together, what I've always thought, and I want to bring this up very quickly, is that if you can't fix everything in the first year, fix part of it in the first year, and then come back in the second year and finish another part, that if you try to move with a comprehensive, and I'm not saying they're going to do that, I want to make that clear, but if you try to fix everything at one time, then you end up with what I think has happened to the Affordable Care Act. You've got more problems than you have solutions. So my hope is that as we move forward, that these VSOs like the Fleet Reserve Association can come together with, if not a whole package, but at least to say to the Congress, let's move this ball slowly down the field. Let's make progress, but let's don't try to score a touchdown on the first play.
Sure. No, that's true. And you mentioned the members of the commission. I just want to say, as I said before, that they were very open to us, and we had a lot of dialogue with them. But one thing that did concern us was the fact that no enlisted personnel actually served on the commission.
I didn't realize
they were
that.
all officers, and we are an enlisted organization, and we think that sometimes the enlisted perspective is different than that of the officers. And we wish that would have, that they would have had some senior enlisted personnel on there, some sergeant majors or, senior chief petty officers on there would have been, I think, a big help to the commission. The commission, you're right. It's an enormous. These 15 recommendations do a lot of changes, and maybe too much change. And the other one too is the TRICARE changes,
Right.
where they basically want to eliminate the TRICARE system and create a brand new system based on the Federal Employee Health Benefit Program, which is a good program, but this kind of change is just really substantial. And a lot of these people that we're dealing with are retirees,
Right.
and would have to completely change to a new system. The other thing that we're concerned about with the TRICARE changes is it would shift a lot of the cost of the program to the retirees. And we think that's, again, we think, health care, just like the retirement benefits, is an earned benefit for someone who served more than 20 years, and to all of a sudden just start taking that away from them, shifting the cost onto them who have a fixed income, we think would be unfair. We think at first we need to look at all the other possibilities that we can do to reduce costs and improve efficiencies of the TRICARE program before we just shift the cost to our retirees.
Well, John, I want to thank you for making that statement. We have, as I said, over 60,000, maybe close to 70,000 retired military active reserve veterans and retired military, and this is a huge issue. And I've made the promise ever since I've had the privilege to serve, and as long as I'm here, that I will stand with those who've done something I did not do, and they have earned the right to that this government made a promise, and the promises need to be kept. So the point of me making that statement as we begin to finish this first segment is let your voices be heard. There are a lot of members that are the Fleet Reserve Association in Eastern North Carolina. As we move forward, and again, there'll be no legislation until next year, 2016, but as we move forward, let your voices be heard, because there are going to be some major changes coming, And you need to be part of the debate so that you can be part of the solution. John, thank you for being on the first segment of this show. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Welcome to the second part of the April edition of Washington Watch. I was so delighted to have John Davis on just a moment ago to talk about the compensation package and the debate that will be forthcoming in Washington. And now, Glen Downs, my friend, but also my chief of staff, now it's our turn to talk about some issues as well.
Well, thank you once again for having me back, Congressman Jones. And I'd like to ask some questions of you that reflect some of the concerns that the people back in the 3rd District in Eastern North Carolina have expressed. And you and Mr. Davis talked about trying to honor the promises made to military personnel, military retirees. And you also talked a little bit about the debt of the nation, and that really gets into priorities. You know, an awful lot has been promised to people of all types and varieties, including veterans and active duty military personnel. Maybe more has been promised that can be delivered on, and what we're seeing here in Washington is a lot of decisions that are dealing with that, and we've seen a lot of animosity here early in this Congress. Can you talk a little bit about, to begin with, about how your colleagues and maybe the leadership in both parties addresses at this time priorities, or our priorities? Are they just funding everything and not kicking cans down the road? What are you seeing in that regard?
Well, Glenn, thank you for that question. The first couple of months have been very interesting in Washington, and even now that we will, at the time of this show, will be coming out with the budget recommendations, or looks more of an outline of what the budget process should be. I have been very disappointed in the leadership of the House. Quite frankly, I didn't vote for John Boehner, as you well know, but I wish him well. He is a Speaker of our House. But right now, I think we are still trying to figure out exactly what our priorities are going to be. Now, we do start with this budget resolution coming forward. That's the beginning. But just like we were saying with Mr. Davis, I mean, there are just so many complex issues facing our country that I don't know how we got into this situation. I didn't vote for any debt ceiling increase, as you know, going back to the late 90s, simply because every time you raise a debt ceiling, you're saying to your government you can go borrow more money from the international markets, which that's like never paying your bills off, so to speak.
Well, since you brought up the debt ceiling, one of the things that has happened, you don't read about it in the newspaper, but we have once again, you will recall a couple of years ago, the debt ceiling wasn't just raised, it was suspended. And that suspension has come to an end. Now, that's been very lightly reported on. So right now, the Treasury Secretary, Mr. Jack Lew, is engaging in these extraordinary measures where the ongoing additional funding above and beyond the taxes coming into the government is being carried by the Treasury Department going in and raiding various trust funds. That'll have to all be repaid, including federal retirees, savings funds, thrift savings plan. Mr. Davis mentioned that. So that a reckoning is coming up. Do you have any sort of sense of how quickly that's going to happen, and what do you think is going to happen with your colleagues on that?
Glenn, I'm glad you explained to the viewers about the suspension of raising the debt ceiling, because what that did was allow the administration almost 18, 19 months of borrowing and spending what we don't have, and then we'll deal with a debt ceiling debate will probably start sometime. I'm thinking it could come in June, July. Some people say more like September. But we are in a very critical situation, and it does impact our veterans and their benefits, our active duty and their benefits, our children and Social Security people. I'm just very concerned that if we don't show the world that we understand we got a problem, then the world's going to stop buying our debt, and that's where I think we're headed.
Well, you mentioned when you were talking about the priorities before we talked about the debt ceiling specifically and the budget, one of the things that Mr. Obama and the Republicans in Congress agreed to a couple of years ago was this process called sequestration, which actually which most people think is a bad way to cut spending or to try to control spending, but if you're not doing anything else, at least it's a way to control spending. Well, now people are really chafing at that, and particularly some of the people that are very big on defense, and one of the tricks that they want to use, and I use that word cautiously because it's true, though.
It is true.
It is true. Is to plus up, spend more money, what they call overseas contingency operations, OCO funds, and so they say, well, we're not, instead of budgeting for things here domestically or replenishing worn-out weapon systems and things like that, we're going to say it's an unexpected, unaccounted for emergency, and that's not subject to the budget cap. So we're just going to spend what we want to spend and not cut anything anywhere.
Glenn, that is a dishonest way to deal with the budget. It's dishonest to the American people and the people of Eastern North Carolina. I am very upset by it. I told Tom Price that I am for rebuilding our military. I am for guaranteeing those who have served what they were promised, but I am not in favor of this continued waste of money in Afghanistan. That's just one area. We continue to spend billions and billions of dollars in Afghanistan, and all we're doing is taking away from what I think is valuable here in America, and I go back to our military, rebuilding the military. But I cannot support and will not support this game that they're playing. I just think it's not honest with the American people.
Well, you have been very open about including Afghanistan, areas where you would cut. You've said you've produced some pretty big ticket items. Anybody watching is welcome to contact your office, and we can get very specific about some big programs and big items that you are willing to cut, but not many of your colleagues are willing to do that. So in other words, you would say, I'm willing to cut this in order to fund the promises made to veterans and active duty military personnel, for example. But increasingly, it seems like we see almost a collusion between the establishment players in Washington, D.C. across party lines. You'll see Miss Nancy Pelosi and Mr. John Boehner getting together and making arrangements and deals on things like the debt ceiling, things like the Social Security, Medicare doc fix, other things, and then once you get this critical mass of people here, if you can get the Obama administration and the leadership of the two parties to agree to something, it's very difficult to stop that, even if debt and interest and those things are not a political debate. Those are just mathematical facts of life, but the Washington establishment seems to want to disregard the mathematical and demographic facts of life.
Well, your point is exactly what's wrong with this Congress right now, is that we are not willing to do what needs to be done. I do not know how a nation can continue to spend money overseas when that nation has to borrow the money by raising the debt ceiling every other year. We continue to play a game that we can take care of the roads and streets in Afghanistan, but we can't take care of the roads and streets in Eastern North Carolina and across the nation. We can't fix the bridges. I don't know. Right now, I really say, Glenn, that there are a few of us in both parties, but primarily my party, the Liberty Caucus, which I'm a member of, the Freedom Caucus that was just formed recently, that we're the ones that continue to vote and to speak out about the fact that we've got to deal with this debt before it collapses America. And that will impact our veterans, it will impact our children and our military. If we don't deal with it now, it's going to be too late.
You know, anecdotally, you brought up before something I've repeated to a lot of people on a lot of different occasions, where we were in Afghanistan. The United States was borrowing money from China in order to fund our military operations in Afghanistan, one of which was to have our military guarding a Chinese mine. So we borrowed money from the Chinese to fund our military to guard the Chinese profit-making venture in Afghanistan.
That is a true story. I had a Colonel Baker to tell me that in my office here in Washington, and that's what he told me. It was so frustrating that here we are with our troops, and we're watching the Chinese do certain types of mining right behind us. And he said we were protecting them indirectly. We were. So, but Glenn, thank you for being on the show today, and thank you for watching. I was delighted to have John Davis from the Fleet Reserve Association to talk on our show about the future of compensation and benefits for our military. And let me say this, we're very proud of our men and women in uniform. All those of you who served in the military, we thank you, and may God continue to bless America. Thank you so much for watching this show.